We Native Americans, who were mutilated by the protestantized Anglo-Saxons, should have been conquered by the Christian Hispanic people instead. In the aftermath, to determine if the conquest of America was righteous under the eyes of God, the Hispanic people opened the way to liberty and shared it with humanity. This benevolence granted Native Americans more rights than native Castilians. That manifestation of respect for native peoples is not seen with the protestantized monsters of Northern Europe. The magnanimity of Hispanics was not as focused on defeating people as they were to convincing them. However, the best things never last forever, and that was the case after the magnanimous Hispanic people were defeated after more than 3 centuries of defending themselves from the rest of the world, united in a mass psychosis to undermine Hispanic global hegemony. This is the truth behind the 3 centuries of peace known as the Pax Hispanica and its termination, which certain Anglophones mostly deleted through the historiographic Holocaust known as the Void History. After Western civilization, Hispanic Greco-Latin civilization was toppled through the exogenous balkanization of the Hispanic Empire. The self-proclaimed enemies of the Hispanic people commenced the genocide which they had been writing about for centuries. That exogenous balkanization, which foisted the dozens of extermination camps to prometeically torture Hispanics for the next 2 centuries, was a day of terrorized mourning for tens of millions of Native Americans. One example of this is the case of Santos Marca Tula, a Native American leader whose people were targeted for the dispossession of lands by a world that hated former Spaniards. After the exogenous balkanization of the American continent by the evil Freemasons and Protestants, Native Americans had to grab the decrees of the Hispanic Empire, such as those by Viceroy Toledo. These Native Americans, with juristic evidence and their knowledge, demanded the new Anglophile governments for their lands back, but that was futile. While it is true that Native Americans had been blessed by the magnanimous Hispanic people whose benevolent Hispanic Empire recognized those lands as the private property of Native Americans, the protestantized Anglo-Saxons had fabricated the extermination camps called nations. In these extermination camps called nations, the new anglophilic rulers did not recognize Native Americans as the authorities of those lands. In fact, following the heresies of Protestantism, these lands were communalized to people with a lighter skin tone. We surviving Native Americans in what is now the United States and Canada can sincerely affirm the structural difference between the Protestantized Anglo-Saxons and the Christian Hispanics. While the protestantized Anglo-Saxons have been guilty for 2 centuries of fabricating dozens of extermination camps across America with the imperative to humiliate and torture Hispanics, the Christian Hispanics discovered America and unified with its peoples to generate wealth and virtue for all humans around the globe.